I'm covering every FPS ever made in Japan. But first, a few rules. First off, I'm doing this chronologically, meaning we're going from the oldest Japanese FPS game made in 1985 all the way to this year of 2025. Secondly, I will not be including space sims, gallery shooters, first-person games where all the fighting is done through melee. And finally, mech games will be included on a case-by-case basis. So this means that games like Robotica are in, but Gun Griffin and Steel Battalion are out. So let's get started. We begin all the way back in 1985 with the Alien Island 3D version for the PC-88, a free-roam FPS game where you're stuck in an island to take out enemies and collect treasure. The goal of the game is to collect said treasure and reach the boat to escape before the monsters get you. And every shot you take travels across to the end of the map, so you can technically take out enemies before you even see them. Now, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to play this game, I can't. Because I could not find this game anywhere. Even when searching YouTube, I could only find one gameplay video on it from a Japanese channel that, as far as I know, is running this off of real hardware. I'm not gonna make the claim that the game isn't dumped, but as of now, I don't think there's a way to play this unless you own a physical copy. Because of this, I can't give it a proper rating, but we can at least acknowledge it. Next up, we have Star Cruiser. This game was originally launched in 1988 for the PC-98, but I'm playing the Sharp X68000 version, which came out a year later, but looks and runs way better. And it's also incredible to see the jump we just underwent from Alien Island to Star Cruiser in just 3 to 4 years. This is a sci-fi open-world first-person RPG where you control a tank, navigate mazes, and talk to NPCs. The story is that you're a pilot for the Earth Federation who's at war with a faction known as the Void. The game is interesting in that it mixes multiple genres into one. When you're in a dungeon or town, you control the game through your tank and you can freely roam around, going into buildings to talk to NPCs, finding NPCs who give you more info, keys to open locked doors, and you'll run into enemy icons which prompt a battle. These will then take you into an arena with one or more enemies, and you have to take them out. And destroying them gives you more money. But I have to say, I'm not a big fan of how you don't fight in the environment you're in, and instead, you're just brought to some random arena. Once you leave dungeons and towns, you can then go into space, and here, the game becomes a free roaming RPG, letting you go to any planet or space station at your will. And you may even engage in space combat, though the funny thing here is that you now fight where you are on the map. You're not just brought to some mysterious arena. This game is super impressive and ambitious for the time, though not without its flaws. For one thing, moving inside dungeons and towns is extremely slow, but then combat becomes fast and fluid when you're brought to those arenas. I'm guessing they did this because the arenas are wide open with few walls in between, which might reduce the strain on the computer. Another thing is that getting from point A to point B in space can take a lot of time and fuel until you get a warp engine. Space combat, while simple, takes some time to getting used to the controls, and I often see other YouTubers who struggle with it. And it's not that the controls are difficult, it's more that the game does not give you time to acclimate. But once you figure it out, space combat becomes pretty doable, if a bit awkward. And finally, the game doesn't really hold your hand. It gives you some general direction as to where you need to go or what you have to do. But when the endgame universe is so big, it's really easy to get lost or stuck. Regardless, the sheer ambition alone is incredible for the time. Add to that some really impressive graphics, good 2D artwork, and excellent music, and you have the full package. I don't think there was any other game quite like this one, and for that reason, I'm giving Star Cruiser an A tier. Star Cruiser would also come out 2 years later for the Sega Mega Drive. Ordinarily, I would not be looking at ports, but after playing both versions back to back, I can safely say that contrary to popular belief, Star Cruiser for the Mega Drive is not a port of the previous game. This is a new and original game set in the same conflict of the first Star Cruiser. You can basically call this Star Cruiser Gaiden. In the first game, you played as Daniel Gibson, but in the Sega version, you're a new character called Brian, while Daniel Gibson is your best friend. And he also underwent quite a bit of a redesign. You can also tell how the graphics and frame rate took a bit of a hit in this version. So you'd think that this game was worse than the X68000 version in every way, right? Well, surprisingly, no! This game is basically the polar opposite of the sharp X68000 version. The PC original was fast and fluid, for the most part, sporting clean graphics and excellent music. And the Sega version is impressive for the hardware, but it runs slow, the draw distance is a bit too short, and there's a few graphical glitches with walls disappearing or duplicating when you turn corners. Because of this, I found myself staring at the bottom map a lot more to help me navigate. And the music, while still pretty great, is a step down from the X68000 version. And even the character art took a bit of a hit if you ask me. But what the game lacks in visuals and presentation, it makes up for it in lessons learned from the first game. For starters, the game now holds your hand a lot more, giving you quests and missions and a much better sense of direction on where you have to go or what you need to do. It's also much easier to revisit old places and talk to characters in case you forgot where you are in the story. Don't get me wrong, this game is still an open-world RPG, letting you explore space on your ship and each planet on foot. But at least now you're exploring with a clear purpose in mind. Not only that, but the minimap and dungeons are a lot better too. In the first game, whenever you pick up a key, the door for it would open automatically elsewhere on the map, so you'd never know which door was now open. But here, locked doors have a clear keyhole design and they only open when you reach them and activate the key, meaning that you always know where you were and where you're going. But perhaps the biggest change is that ground combat is now fought where you are instead of being teleported to an empty arena, and this massively changes ground combat. Now, the game basically controls like an early Wolfenstein 3D clone, where you have to watch out for enemies on corners, and there's also a greater variety of foes like moving enemies or stationary turrets. Not only that, but just like the first game, you can buy new gear and items for your tank and spaceship. And all of that on top of the RPG, space combat, and free roaming portions of the game, all while running on a system that isn't known for FPSs. The fact that this game does all of this with no enhancement chips whatsoever, and while predating Wolfenstein 3D by 2 years and Star Fox by 3 years, is impressive beyond belief. The next time a Super Nintendo fan brings up Star Fox, Sega fans really need to start countering with Star Cruiser. This is an A+ game. This is Raid Thunder for the original Game Boy, a first-person game where you control a hover tank in a maze. The movement is grid-based, which means that you only turn in 90-degree angles, similar to games like Wizardry or Etrian Odyssey. And the goal of the game is to go around each level and take out all enemies or collect all the parts. It's basically one or the other. Thankfully, you can bring out a map that lets you know where your foes are, as well as any health pickups. Sadly though, the graphics are minimal and the audio is basically non-existent. There is no music during gameplay, so basically you only get sound effects. Not only that, but if there are any power-ups, I certainly couldn't find any. I respect the game for the ambition, but sadly, this game got really boring really quickly. D tier. Next up, we have Silent Debuggers for the PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16. And this is a sci-fi first-person survival horror game. It's the distant future and you're a treasure hunter who explores derelict ships for valuables. But during one of your runs, you and your partner find yourselves locked in a ship infested with monsters. The game is played in first person, but your movement is grid-based just like Great Thunder. You have the entire ship to explore at your will, which you have to do so while conserving your ammo and batteries, the latter of which acts as your health, but also power-ups other systems like your minimap and weapons that do not use traditional ammo types. You also have 6 different weapon types, but you can only carry 2 with you at the same time. You can replenish both your energy and your ammo by going to specific charge stations and ammo rooms. But the problem is that these ammo rooms also have limited ammo. So it really plays up to that basic survival horror gameplay element of having to conserve your ammo while still trying to survive, which is really impressive considering that this game predates Alone in the Dark by a year and Resident Evil by 4 years. I also like how you do not have one singular goal, but rather your buddy gives you objectives and tells you where you need to go or what you need to do. And enemies take different amounts of damage depending on where you aim, while different enemy types will behave differently. Some will try to ambush you, while others run away to get you to waste your ammo. All of this results in a super tense, but super difficult and super frustrating experience that is unlike any other 16-bit game. B+ tier. This is Armor Trooper Votoms Dead Ash for the X68000, based on an anime and manga series of the same name, which I've never read or watched. And this is a mech game which can best be described as a superscalar game if superscalar games weren't on rails. And what you get is a very pretty, very fun, if shallow game that is mostly ruined by some pretty extreme difficulty. So you can choose between 2 mech types, 4 main guns, and 2 sub-weapons. And I think the goal here is to take out every enemy on the level, but I'm not too sure on that, because there's all these lengthy cutscenes between missions and I have no idea what they're saying. The game will usually place you on an open map with hardly any barriers that you can use for cover, so you really gotta pay attention to enemy positioning on the minimap and move accordingly. But man, this game is just incredibly difficult. Even when I lowered the difficulty to easy, I was still getting my ass kicked. Basically, I can beat mission 1 and reach halfway of the second mission before hitting a game over. There's potential here, but the difficulty really needs to be toned down a notch or 2. C tier. This is Gunbuster for arcades, a cross between a light gun game and a first-person shooter. You play as a bounty hunter in a cyberpunk dystopic world, and your goal is to take out your mission's bounty. The interesting thing about this game is that you can move in any direction you want as if it were a normal first-person shooter, and you do that by moving your aiming reticle towards the edge of the screen, which, admittedly, it is a little awkward to do, because it leaves you vulnerable to enemy fire. But then again, this game came out the same year as Wolfenstein 3D, so it's not like the basics of the genre had been firmly established yet. The levels, if you can call them that, are basically just one big boss fight with you fighting against the boss and the occasional disposable enemy while shooting down any missiles that come your way, as well as dodging lasers and the like. As a result, most stages can be completed in just 3 to 4 minutes, and the game itself is very short. What's interesting though is that even though this game is divided into stages, every level is basically a mini arena that can be traversed in roughly 30 seconds. And if you add to that the fact that every level is basically just you against the boss, with maybe a couple of disposable enemies thrown in, it means that this is basically a first-person deathmatch game. Like, they were so close to figuring out the genre. And they did all of this 7 years before games like Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament were released. I seriously cannot overstate how forward-thinking this game was, and how close Taito was to figuring out what is arguably the most popular online experience we currently have in the West. But as impressive as Gunbuster is, the game itself is fine. The first few levels feel like glorified tutorials, and then the difficulty really amps up. But the gameplay feels quite shallow by modern FPS standards, so it's really more impressive on a historical level and due to its visuals. Because as a game, it's okay, it's fun, but a little short and a little shallow. But it serves as a nice window of what it could have been had this style of game ever taken off back in the day. B-. This is Elm Knight for the PC98 and FM Towns line of computers, though I'll be playing the PC98 version. And this is another mech game that runs on a grid, similar to Ray Thunder on the Game Boy, meaning that once again, you can only make 90-degree turns, though the levels are much more intricate and you even have a wider assortment of weapons. But your enemies are arguably just as dumb, if not dumber, than the Game Boy game. One major issue I have with Elm Knight are the cutscenes. These are the most beautiful looking and well-animated cutscenes I've seen yet, but they just do not end. Like, as soon as you boot up the game, you get a 4-minute unskippable cutscene. Then you're shown the title screen, followed by another 8-minute cutscene. Then, you're finally taken to your mech, and you think you're about to play, right? Nope, there's still more dialogue. All in all, it took me 18 minutes to finally start playing, and even then, gameplay was often interrupted by even more cutscenes. Once I defeated the level 1 boss and saw yet another cutscene, I got taken to a military base where we were now on foot with a handgun and could talk to NPCs. Unfortunately though, this is where the language barrier prevented me from progressing. Look, I don't think it's right for me to give this game a rating. Clearly, the story is a major part of it, and playing just one level isn't enough to get a good feel for it, especially if there's some sort of RPG town mechanic thrown in. The game might be good, but without speaking the language, it's just not fair for me to give it a rating. This is X for the Nintendo Game Boy, a game developed by Argonaut Software of Star Fox fame and Nintendo R&D 1. I wasn't sure if I should include this one because technically it was code developed by Western developers, but I'll throw it in anyway. This is a first-person tank simulator where you go to Mars to fight aliens, and to say that this game is ambitious is putting it mildly. Not only is the game in first person, but enemies, buildings and objects are all made out of polygon wireframes. The game gives you a map that you can freely explore, where you can go to bases to recharge or switch out your gear whenever you need to. And between levels, you're given different objectives like take out enemies, bosses, going from point A to point B, that sort of thing. And it's super impressive how buildings in this game can be destroyed by our enemies and they stay destroyed, meaning that you just lost a recharge base. Hell, you can even go up a slope at full speed and now you're flying through the map. Or you can use one of the many tunnels and now you're in this Star Fox-like minigame. The fact that this is running on the original Game Boy is just incredible. And you'd think the controls would be difficult, or that this would veer a bit too much into the tank simulator genre, therefore excluding it from this video. But no, the controls are all fairly easy to grasp. I actually had to force myself to stop playing this game because I already had enough footage. So yeah, this is an easy A. We now jump back to Star Cruiser with Star Cruiser 2 The Odysseus project for the PC-98 and FM Towns line of computers. Though I'll be playing the PC-98 version because that one received an English translation. And as you can tell, the graphics are more in line with the Mega Drive version, which makes sense because this game did not receive an X68000 port, which was generally a more powerful system as far as I know. But the speed and handling is much faster this time around, including in towns and dungeons where the X68000 original struggled. The game takes place 5 years after Void's defeat. And call me crazy, but I think you're actually playing as the main character from the Mega Drive version. So I guess the Sega spin-off is the canon version. And this game is a major improvement over the first one, in that it combined the best elements of the PC and Sega versions into one. So as mentioned before, this looks better than the Sega version and even runs better than the X68000 version. Ground combat is back, and just like the Sega version, it's now fought where you actually are on the map. You're not just taken to some random arena. Though if you don't like the FPS gameplay, you have the option to change the combat system to a turn-based RPG, which is a pretty cool feature. And once again, you have the entire solar system to explore, and you can either do it manually or use an autopilot. And once again, just like the previous game, you can explore each planet you visit on the ground with your tank. Space combat is still just as awkward as the previous two games, though again, not nearly as bad as some people make it out to be. And when you're in town, rather than just talk to characters, you're given a visual novel style menu, so you can talk, use items, take items, interact with things, that sort of thing. And of course, you can also buy gear and weapons, which makes your vehicle stronger. It's such a crying shame that this series was forgotten. I remember reading some 5 years ago that the creator was hoping to secure funding for a third game, but it seems that didn't go anywhere. And the fact that publishers never brought this series to the West is an absolute crime. S tier. This is Iron Angel of the Apocalypse for the 3DO. You're a human being who has been revived and put inside a robot body by a mad doctor who hopes to create the perfect living being. And not gonna lie here, these cutscenes are pretty great. Usually live action cutscenes during this time are pretty goofy, but here it works to establish the mood really well.
生まれ変わった気分はどうだ。お前には鉄人になるチャンスが与えられたのだ。必要なのは意識だ。意識だけが自らの意志を持つ存在として認識し、その意志を加速させることができる。What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
So now you're stuck in this maze and you have to navigate your way out by exploring the various floors. And get ready for this type of game, because you're gonna start seeing a lot of these very soon. Anyway, the game's pacing is slow and methodical, and at first I thought that this was an issue with the 3DO's limitations. So I boosted the CPU speed by 69%.
Nice.
But the game still ran slow for me, and that's when I realized that this is intentional. Yes, this is a first-person shooter, but unlike the many reviews I've read about this game over the years, this is clearly not inspired by Wolfenstein or Doom, but rather this game descends from dungeon crawling RPGs. Even in Japan, the game billed itself as an action RPG, even though there are no stats or experience points. But rather, the goal is to explore the dungeon itself. So you'll have to defeat enemies, pick up ammo and shield recharges, find icons that will populate your map, and you'll go up and down floors trying to reach your way out. And the game is designed around this slow-paced movement, with enemies having simple, repetitive patterns. Even bosses have simple weak spots, like being vulnerable at the back, that sort of thing. Part of the issue though is just how repetitive the first portion of the game is. It feels as though the first 10 floors are essentially one long tutorial section. But once you beat the first boss, it becomes very clear how this game is inspired by the likes of wizardry. As the difficulty goes up, you're now expected to clear each floor in multiple expeditions, while running back to safe spots and recharge points, with the goal being to slowly clear the floor and look for the next exit to the elevator. And you'll start seeing floors that move one way but not another, trapped floors, doors that only open one way. Like, this is wizardry! This is wizardry transplanted onto an FPS! But what the game really manages to do well is the setting and the mood. Dialogue is often cryptic, and you get the sense that the Doctor might just be the last remaining human. Iron Angel of the Apocalypse is not a game for everyone, and because of this, it's been a deeply misunderstood game over the years. This isn't Doom, it's a dungeon crawler, and one which, while it still needs some major improvements, it's not nearly as bad as others would have you believe. Be there. Next up, we have Starfire for the PC-98, a sci-fi FPS that uses the engine from Might and Magic 3. Yes, that's right! A Japanese studio took the engine from a Western fantasy RPG and turned it into a sci-fi FPS. Man, that is just insane! Anyway, you play as a group of mercenaries taking on missions for the government, which has you boarding ships and space stations to take out the boss at the end. And once again, all movement is grid-based. Every enemy you defeat stays gone forever. And they also drop money, so it's a good idea to fully clear a ship before tackling the boss, especially because there are no experience points here, but rather your upgrades come in the form of better gear and permanent stat boosts you get by spending money. At first the game seems really basic, as you can take out most enemies from a distance and they take a long time to react, making them easy prey. In fact, I didn't have any difficulty until I reached the bosses, which usually could only be defeated by walking up point blank to them and then hitting the fire button as fast as possible to take them out before they took me out. In fact, I was almost ready to write off this game as mediocre due to it being so repetitive. But then something incredible happened. After you beat your 10th or so mission, the game opens up and becomes an open world RPG. Now you can travel across the universe to wherever you want, take on missions, and buy gear or permanent upgrades. It's kind of weird how the game requires you to play for 2 hours, where you essentially do the same over and over again until it finally decides to give you full access. But in its defense, it becomes a real whoa moment. You even unlock space combat now, complete with ships that look like they were ripped straight from Star Wars and Star Trek. And to round up the package, the graphics are pretty good and the music is excellent. Because of this, I'm gonna give it A+. And if it weren't for those initial 2 hours, I would have given this an easy S tier. This is Crime Crackers for the PlayStation, a sci-fi FPS that mixes the FPS genre with a dungeon crawler. I told you we'd be seeing a lot of these. Just like in Starfire, you play as a team of bounty hunters taking on missions to capture criminals. Though unlike Starfire, you now have full 3D movement, and the goal is to navigate the maze, defeat enemies, and the stage boss. It sounds easy, but this time we're deep into wizardry-style map design, because you're going to get lost in this game a lot. Not helped by how similar everything in this game looks. Now granted, in level 1 you can find an auto map that helps you out, and if you miss that item, you can simply buy it at the shop. But make no mistake, even with that auto map, you will get lost in this game. So, in this game, you control 3 characters at the same time, each with their own attack range, speed, and damage. The dinosaur dude and the brunette-looking girl all share the same ammo, so if you run out, you could be in trouble. Thankfully, the cat girl here has a sword, which has a super low range, but doesn't consume ammo. You can also buy, find, and equip characters with weapons, armor, and items like healing stuff and ammo supplies. One interesting thing about this game is that each character has their own health bar, and different characters will take damage depending on their positioning. So for example, if the cat girl is leading the team and you take damage in front of you, the cat girl takes damage. But if you're hit on the sides, then the other characters take damage. Firing in this game is kinda weird. Basically, you can move however you want, but once you start firing, you can only move your aiming icon, not your party, so you'll often have to shoot, stop to move, and then shoot again. Thankfully, you also have a defense button, which blocks minor projectiles. Not only that, but enemies you defeat will stay down. Some of the game's limitations come into play in some odd ways, like how enemies cannot leave the rooms they're in, so you can use that to your advantage and fire at them from a distance and they can't go after you. You'll also be running around quite a lot looking for keys to doors, and these levels have a lot of keys. At the end of each mission, you get cracker points, and you get these by defeating more enemies and fully exploring the dungeon. They really couldn't find a better name for that. The higher your cracker points, the more your rank increases, which allows you to buy better gear. Sadly though, I feel this game gets way too repetitive for its own good, not helped by the equally repetitive graphics and music. It's kind of weird how this didn't bother me in Iron Angel, but here it really bothers me. Though you do get these visual novel style cutscenes between the levels. The music itself is good, but the tracks are short and keep looping for each level, which is a problem considering that you could spend hours on the later stages. By the end of it, the music was starting to get really grating on me. Though funnily enough, the title theme song sounds like something out of an 80s sitcom intro. Overall, the game is okay. It had a lot of potential, but it feels like it was mostly squandered. C+. We now jump to Geograph seal for the X68000, and to say that this game's visual design was inspired by Star Fox is an understatement. Except that in this game, instead of controlling a spaceship, you control a tank that can jump. So each mission, you get a bunch of targets to take down before you face against the boss. And you get to fire at enemies, jump at them, or jump and fire at them at the same time. And some eagle-eyed viewers might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, this sounds a lot like Jumping Flash for the PlayStation. And you'd be right, because this game was made by the same studio who would go on to create Jumping Flash just 1 year later. Unlike Jumping Flash though, the focus here is on the combat, and not so much what little platforming there is. You also get new weapons as you take down foes, and you can even upgrade them or switch between them. The game runs pretty smooth when you're on the floor, but you can really feel that frame rate drag and dip as soon as you jump. But regardless, I still had a lot of fun with this game. S tier.
It is 5 years after the establishment of the World Federation.
This is Metalhead for the Sega 32X, a game that was a graphical showpiece for the system, but not a gameplay one. You control a giant mech as you wander around urban areas and military bases completing mission objectives, most of which relate to defeating every enemy or a specific enemy. But there's also a few escort missions thrown in, because everyone loves those. And these missions are given to you in what is possibly the funniest briefing dude I've ever seen.
We've detected the enemy's frontline base somewhere in this area. Find the base and get a photograph of the entrance.
What even is that? Sadly though, this game is really repetitive. I've played this game many times over the years and it's always the same thing. I enjoy the first 5 minutes or so, but 20 minutes in, I'm bored out of my mind. And the music also becomes really grating. Between missions, you go to a shop where you can select your gear depending on how many points you've collected, but even the shop is super limited. There's basically 2 weapons for your right and left arm, as well as upgrades for them, followed by a special weapon. The game isn't bad per se, it just gets kind of boring after a while. C-. This is Iron Angel of the Apocalypse: The Return for the 3DO, the sequel to Iron Angel of the Apocalypse. And this one is kind of interesting, because while the first game was made for Japan, the sequel was very clearly created with a Western audience in mind. As a result, Iron Angel 2 is more of a traditional FPS, the kind of which seems to be a direct descendant from the likes of Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. Even in Japan, the game billed itself as a 3D action game, whereas the first game called itself an action RPG, and you can really tell the difference. The maps are larger and more Doom-like, with switches and buttons you have to press to open doors, more enemies, you get new weapons sooner, and the action is a lot faster. And you always have an auto map with you instead of having to get it on each floor as an item. I also like how you'll walk onto screens and get these small videos filling you in on the lore and plot. But maybe the Doom comparison is wrong, because the game reminds me a lot more of Marathon by Bungie, which came out a year before. Even the guns and the HUDs look similar, and Marathon would also let you learn more about the story by having you approach certain screens and computers, just like Iron Angel. But the Bungie comparisons don't stop there, because this game also has regenerating health and you can only carry 2 weapons with you at the same time. It's like they were inspired by Marathon and in turn predicted the Halo franchise a good 6 years before the Xbox even existed. Now granted, one of those weapons is your handgun, which has infinite ammo but also needs to recharge, and that can take quite a while, which often slows down the pacing of the gameplay. And yet, despite all these improvements, Iron Angel feels like a step back from the first one in many ways. For starters, all the FMVs are now done in CG, including the humans, and it just looks less unique. The story isn't nearly as mysterious or cryptic as the first game. Now you actually do know that there are other humans, for example. The game still has some frame rate issues, but you can improve this on an emulator by increasing the CPU speed. You also now have this little robot dude who is constantly talking to you and telling you what you need to do. And he's very concerned about his stash.
Hoss is in the back. Watch it.
I don't know, as a game this one is arguably better, but it lost so much of what made the first one feel unique. It also doesn't help that every weapon is basically the same as your handgun, but just with different firing rates and damage outputs. Which, granted, Wolfenstein 3D also did this, but that game was 3 years old by this point. Like, check this out, I just got a grenade launcher. Now, look what happens when I fire it.
Oh, hell no, man. What the
Also, the boss battles just suck so much. I ran out of ammo with my secondary weapon and was only left with my dinky little handgun, and it took me like 30 minutes just to beat this guy. Not 30 minutes because I kept dying, no, 30 consecutive minutes where I just keep using hit and run tactics to finally beat him. Finally, the game will also occasionally throw in some flying segments to spice up the gameplay, but these are fairly shallow. I'm really conflicted about this one. On one hand, it lost a lot of the uniqueness of the first one, in favor of a more traditional FPS style of gameplay. But for 1995 standards, the gunplay here was seriously behind the times. I'm gonna go with B-. We now jump to Kileak, the DNA imperative for the original PlayStation. This is yet another game where you're on a mech or a power armor in a grey maze, which has you going up and down floors on an elevator. I told you we were gonna see a lot of these. I will say though, you really notice the PS1 graphical upgrade in this game, especially after playing games like Iron Angel or Metalhead. So the goal here is to reach the elevator in each floor, though most elevators are locked and will usually require you to push a button or find a key. I will say though that this game creates a really poor first impression, because it just keeps interrupting your gameplay with FMV sequences. But thankfully, these will soon become rare enough. The game is basically a survival shooter, and what I mean by that is, you don't restore your ammo or health between floors. So even if you beat a floor, you might actually screw yourself in the future if you've barely got any ammo or health saved up and then you save your game. And I swear, the issue with these games is just how visually bland they are. I mean, yeah, on a technical level this looks good, but all you ever see in Kileak, and most of these Robot Maze games for that matter, is just grey on grey. Thankfully, the minimap helps in not getting lost, but much like in Iron Angel 1, you need to find the full auto map item. Another odd quirk with this game is that you not only have a health bar, but you also have a battery level, which is constantly draining. And some weapons will use batteries instead of ammo. And I mean, sure, there's recharge stations, but believe me, this game is brutally difficult. Especially once you reach about level 5 or 6, and it feels like every enemy takes 30 to 50 hits to go down. And no, I am not exaggerating. Also, much like Alien Island, your shots don't have a range limit, so you can just fire off into the darkness and it'll take out enemies before you even see them. Nah man, I'm sorry, but Kileak ain't it. D-.
Cartridge secured. Keycard secured.
This is Robotica for the Sega Saturn, and this game is, and you're not gonna believe this, a first-person shooter where you're a mech or a power armor in a grey maze. Why are there so many of these? Now, in Robotica's defense, I actually like this one quite a bit more than Kileak. Once again, this is another survival FPS where you need to reach the elevator at the end of the stage to reach the next floor. And once again, elevators are locked and you'll need to find the keycard to get there, yada yada yada, same formula. What makes this game different is that every level is randomly generated, so no two stages are alike, which sounds cool in theory, but the thing about randomly generated stages is that you need to add some rules to this, or else you get the chaos that is Robotica. What I mean is, sometimes you'll spawn right next to the keycard and door that you need to use to go to the next level. Other times, you'll spawn right on top of electric floors, meaning that you have no choice but to take damage. Sometimes you'll be lucky and be in floors full of ammo, weapons and weapon upgrades, and other times you'll go through several floors while finding none of that. Yeah, your runs in this game are a real crapshoot. With that said, I do like how you not only get new weapons, weapons, but you can even find items that upgrade them or downgrade them. So this roguelike element means that the game ends up having some of the best elements from Iron Angel 1 and 2. Though there's basically no plot here, and just like Kileak, the visuals get really boring after a few minutes. Actually, in that regard, this game is even worse than Kileak, because at least Kileak would occasionally throw in some differently colored rooms, but in Robotica, every level looks exactly the same. Then, you also have some rooms with no lighting, and you can either try and look for the switch by constantly hugging the wall, or just deal with it and accept the low visibility. Man, there was a lot of potential here, but Robotica really needs some game design quirks ironed out. C+. From Sega to Nintendo, this is Innsmouth no Yakata, a grid-based horror first-person shooter for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. So the game is simple. Too simple, in fact. Every level you have to find the key and one of the doors that leads out. If you find an enemy, you can fire at it, but your ammo is limited. Along the way, you'll also pick up health and demo packs, items that show you the full level map or where each item is located on said map. So far, so good. But now, here's the problem. Just like Robotica, every item on the map is placed randomly. So once again, you might spawn next to a key, or you might walk all around the map and never find it. And that's a problem too, because each level has a super stingy time limit. I mean, most levels need to be completed in just 1 to 2 minutes, so you do not have the time to sit around and wonder if you've already been here. Especially if you haven't found the map or the power-up that lets you see where items are on the map. So as a result, Innsmouth no Yakata ends up being entirely luck-based. You might go through several levels without running into a single ammo pack, and most levels aren't built around you not having ammo, because monsters will chase you, and most levels don't offer alternate pathways for you to avoid them while still progressing to your goal. In fact, I discovered that the best way to progress through the game is by getting a game over and then putting in a password, because you then start with full health and 2 full ammo packs. This game also has multiple endings depending on which exits you take, but you don't know which door leads where, or which of these is the good ending. In the end, I was able to finish the game, and ironically, the final map was actually a really good one, because unlike every other map on my way here, it actually gave me many alternate paths to avoid enemies. But yeah, this game is entirely luck-based. As a Wizardry fan, I thought I was gonna love this one, but I really didn't like it at all. F tier. Oh yeah, Jumping Flash for the PS1! Now this is where it's at. So, Jumping Flash is a first-person 3D platformer with some shooting elements. I actually wasn't sure if I wanted to include this series in the video, but I knew if I didn't, I'd have a lot of people complaining, so here we are. Anyway, the game tells the story about an evil mad scientist who stole chunks of a planet to turn it into his own private retreat. You can defeat enemies by either shooting them, jumping on them, or both. And not only can you jump really high, but you even have a double jump. And I gotta say, the draw distance in Jumping Flash is super impressive. Hell, even by 2025 standards, this is still an impressive draw distance. Along the way, you'll fight bosses, pick up sub-weapons, and do bonus missions. The game is simple, but my god, is it fun! And there's something just really appealing about all of these high jumps and landing a jump exactly where you meant to. Oh, and the music is really good too. And you know what? I'm just glad that it's not another maze game, you know? Anyway, you also have some maze levels where you goddammit. No, but really, you also have some stages where you can't really jump, and the game now becomes a full-fledged first-person shooter. And these stages, they're alright, I guess. Your sub-weapons are single-use only, so you're basically just always using your regular laser, which is fine, but Doom this is not. Regardless, this is still a super fun game, and it's easy to see why so many people have fond memories of Jumping Flash. S tier. Well, looks like we're back to Kileak, with Kileak 2 The Blood. Yes, they put out 2 Kileak games in the same year. Damn, Genki, calm down, why don't ya? Thankfully, this game is way better than its predecessor. The game starts out really strong with far better visuals on both the technical level and art style level. Basically, this has now become a more traditional FPS, where you need to get from point A to point B while taking out enemies, finding differently colored keycards, that sort of thing. You also get to pick out your gear before each mission, and I like how in level 1 you find multiple screens that feed you the lore of this world. I was honestly ready to give this game an A, but then I get to the following levels and, I mean, they're not bad, but they're a noticeable step down from level 1. It became really clear that they put a lot of effort in level 1 and not so much the rest. The game also has this AI bot that is constantly blocking your minimap every time you defeat an enemy, while giving you useless information like its name and favorite Kardashian. Though thankfully, you can turn it off. Overall, the game isn't perfect, but it's a major improvement over the first Kileak. B-. Next up, we have Expert for the PS1. Some building has been taken over by criminals and you're about to pull a Die Hard.
Make sure nobody else here is doing a Die Hard.
And take them all out. The game is a Wolfenstein 3D style shooter in that all the walls are square and there are no slopes or elevations, which is kind of behind the times for 1996 on the PlayStation. But surprisingly, I really enjoyed this one, and it's a real pleasure just going around and mowing everyone down while picking up new ammo, rescuing hostages, and occasionally triggering cutscenes whose dialogue I can't read for obvious reasons. Between missions, you also get to pick your loadout, which consists of a main gun, a pistol, grenades, and a knife. And whatever ammo you end up with upon completing a level carries over onto that loadout for the next time you use it, so keep that in mind. You also have some fairly unique ideas, like a level set in the dark where you use night goggles, which is cool, but you'd think your enemy's aim would also get worse, but no such luck. The game is simple, but gets the basics right. And you know what? Sometimes simple is good. B+. From one SWAT-themed game to another, this is Tokusou Kidoutai J-SWAT for the Sega Saturn. Kinda weird how we got 2 Wolfenstein 3D style SWAT-themed shooters that only launched in Japan and all within months of each other. And I gotta say, this game impresses with all of its cutscenes being live action, which I can only describe as Power Rangers SWAT teams. Like, everyone's moves is so theatrical and exaggerated and filled with pyrotechnics, and just the most insane looking battles. This is so great, I love it! I especially love the cutscenes where everyone is trying to be silent only to then make a ton of noise cocking their guns as loudly as possible and then shouting. Yeah, good job there, guys. As for the game itself, well, it's definitely uglier than Expert, but it's pretty much the same style of game, meaning you once again have Wolfenstein 3D style maps, where every wall is a square and there is no elevation. Well, that's not completely true. There is some elevation as you go up and down floors, but you don't control these. The game just assumes control during these hardcore stair climbing sequences. And some enemies will either be above or below you, and you'll have to manually set your sights to hit them, which is a pretty awkward thing to do on a Sega Saturn controller. But despite all of this, I actually really enjoyed this game. It's fun taking out enemies, and I like how perps will often surrender and you have to arrest them, or you might risk them getting back up and firing at you. And I gotta say, this game has the weakest machine guns I've ever seen. You can unload a full clip point blank and the enemy still won't go down. Between missions you can also choose your gear, and this is much more in-depth than expert, as you have more freedom on your loadout, but you also have to watch out for things like weight and ammo clips, because yes, the enemies here do not drop ammo. But perhaps the most interesting thing is that you can set your teammates' actions during each mission. This includes your point of entry, snipers, fire support, and how long you want to wait before each team does their thing. This is some pretty in-depth stuff, especially considering Rainbow Six was still 2 years away. Honestly, I've always heard how this game was terrible, but after playing it, I can safely say that this is a guilty pleasure. Beat there.
Jumping Flash 2! Big Trouble in Little Moo!
And now, we're back to Jumping Flash 2. Taking place after the events of Jumping Flash 1, a new villain has appeared, Captain Kabuki, who has started bottling planets. And now, the villain from the first game calls on you to save the day. It's kinda funny how the cutscenes are so much better in this game, as is the voice acting. You really get the sense that the voice actors understood the assignment, with Baron Aloha having a cartoonishly German accent.
Hey, Baron! Robbit's here. We're saved.
Just because he's the hero don't mean you gotta root for him.
And especially Captain Kabuki, who just sounds like he's having so much fun in his role.
Naughty, naughty, naughty little space bunny.
Other than that, well, this is basically the same game as Jumping Flash 1, just with new, slightly more difficult levels. As far as I can tell, everything else is the same. You get the same sub-weapons, same style of bonus stages, and even the graphics don't really seem improved over the first game. And the music is just as excellent as the first game. So, yeah, still an S tier. This is Maze 999 for the PC-98, a game which I sadly can't play because I can't find it anywhere. I've searched for it high and low. I even tried checking those huge PC-98 compilation lists from archive.org, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. Even on YouTube, the only thing I could find was this 2-minute clip, which, well, just listen to it. Woof. Maybe it's a good thing that I can't find this game. Either way, I can't rate it like this. Next game. This is Enemy Zero for the Sega Saturn, a survival horror first-person shooter game. You play as Laura and you're in a spaceship where your crew are suddenly brought out of cryo-freezing, and you see one of your shipmates get taken out by something invisible. Well, it turns out that the ship has been overrun by invisible aliens, and now it's your job to somehow survive this ordeal. Yeah, you can tell this was inspired by the Alien movies. Lara, though, remains pretty calm despite having just seen one of her friends get taken out, because she takes her sweet time doing anything. So the meat of the game is you going from room to room, picking up items, using stuff, and reading information that she should already know, like the names and rooms of her shipmates. You can really tell that this game is made by the same studio who made D, because it has the same slow pacing, but the mood is honestly excellent. I know I'm making fun of the game, but the tension is generally high, and even the uncanny way Laura moves lends itself to how eerie and solitary your experience is. Once you leave a room, you're sent to this first-person view, and the graphics are honestly pretty impressive for the Sega Saturn, though they do come at a cost. The first is that the gameplay window is really small, and secondly, all your enemies are invisible, which is a pretty creative way of saving console resources. So what happens now is that you need to find a gun and a radar that beeps the closer you are to your foes. The thing is, you don't know from what direction they're coming, and your gun has a super short range. And yet, despite all of this, it all kind of works. The fact that you can't afford to make mistakes and that you're always alone really drives up the tension. And even the small touches heighten the experience, like the game just taking its time with your movements or showing Laura a sigh of relief when she escapes a deadly situation. This truly feels like a product of a bygone era of gaming. I also like how the game comes in 4 discs, but the first disc is literally just the game intro, a tutorial on how to fight against invisible enemies, and then a music video on the team who made this. Man, I miss this period of rockstar game design. And I swear, Enemy Zero has to be the most 3DO game on the Sega Saturn, but I mean that in a good way. This game isn't for everyone, but if you want a slower paced, tense experience, then this is the game for you. A-. This is Brahma Force for the original PlayStation, and believe it or not, this was meant to be Kileak 3. Yes, it's another Kileak game, but honestly, this is the best one. Admittedly, I wasn't sure if I should include it in this video, because this game veers a bit too much into the mech sim genre, but I might as well complete the trilogy. Anyway, in Brahma Force, you're piloting a giant mech, and not only do you have a pretty wide range of weapons to choose from, but you even have an inventory with multiple items that include repair units, battery recharges, ammo, and even parts to upgrade your gear. Once again though, the levels tend to look a little grey for my taste, but I do like how much verticality there is to the game. You'll often be jumping and climbing all over the place in order to progress, open passageways, and the like. Honestly, there's not a lot to say here, not because the game is bad, but mostly because Brahma Force went all in on the mech sim genre, and it's all the better for it. But it also means that it doesn't really belong in this video. It took them a while, but they got there. B+. Speaking of mech games, this is Gundam Side Story for the Sega Saturn, and this game actually got 3 different releases over the course of a year, each with just 5 missions, making them incredibly short. But because the games are mostly the same between them, I'll just include all 3 as a single release, and it also helps that I physically own parts 1 and 3. Now, I'm not familiar with the Gundam plotline, but I do appreciate that the game's intro has English subtitles right out of the box. And yes, this is also a giant mech game, but unlike Brahma Force, there's basically no sim in this game, making the gameplay a lot closer to a traditional FPS title. Anyway, the missions basically come down to defeating every enemy, defending a base, destroying the enemy base, or taking out a boss. And you'll usually have other mechs to help you out with each mission. And to their credit, your teammates are actually pretty good. They can handle themselves fine, and will usually take out enemies if left alone. Now, one thing I've noticed about a lot of reviews I've seen about this game is that they seem to miss how this game works. Basically, Gundam Side Story is all about distancing. See, against most basic enemies, you simply have to strafe and shoot, but against others, you need to get in point blank, while others, you have to get around them. If you just try to beat everyone by circle strafing, you're gonna have a bad time. So you just gotta figure out what kind of positional weakness each each mech type has. Now, I don't own the second game, but going from the first one to the third one, you can definitely notice some nice improvements. For starters, dialogue cutscenes now have these animated faces, and the mechs themselves look a little better with slightly more detailed texture work. But the biggest change of them all is that you now have a melee attack, and this is a huge game changer. Because you perform a melee attack by dashing towards them, and this will usually stun or even knock down your foe, allowing you to fire at them while they're still down. Other than that though, it's pretty much more of the same, though you now have a mission inside a large base where your movement is more constrained, and you even have one set in space, where you have some minor vertical movement, but it doesn't really change much. Overall, I'm just gonna review these as if they were a single game. Having to buy them 3 times to get the full experience is pretty bad, but at least they're also pretty cheap. If this were a full game with all 15 missions in just one release, I'd give it an A-. As it is though, I'll give it a solid B tier. This is target gear for the PC. No, not the PC98 or the Sharp X68000 or the FM Town Smarty, but just regular old PCs with Windows 95. And this is yet another mech game, though I should point out that when capturing my footage, my software was only able to capture it in this small window, so excuse the blurry look. Another thing I should point out is that some of the FMVs do seem to be missing, but others work just fine, so I have no idea why that is. And as for the game itself, it's okay, I guess. Graphically, it kind of reminds me of Terminal Velocity or Fury 3, and it has about the same depth as those games. You'll go on missions where you have to defend your base, or take out all enemies, or provide escort. And to be fair, the gameplay is fine and the music is really good, but the game itself just didn't really grab me. By the time I reached the 4th mission, I was getting a little bored with how samey it felt, which ironically is the same issue I have with Terminal Velocity, though I do at least have nostalgia for that one. But this game, it's just okay. C tier. We now jump back to Crime Crackers with Crime Crackers 2, and this is an improvement over the first game in just about every way, though they still kept the 80s sitcom style theme song. The improvements begin before you even start playing the game, as not only do you now have more FMV animations, but the in-game cutscenes are a lot better too. The first one had that sort of 3DO feel to it, but now we're very clearly into the PS1 era. The game's graphics have also improved, offering more varied visuals, a better map, and even your party roster has been upped from 3 characters to 4. Stages are also smaller and more manageable, so you're not as likely to get lost. In fact, when playing this game, I got some real Mega Man Legends vibes out of it. You also have slopes and elevations, unlike the first game, and elevators now don't require loading screens, it's all just part of the same dungeon. Between missions you can once again purchase gear and items, and the boss designs and fights are way more creative and interesting this time around. Like for example, you fight these dudes individually, but then they join up into a single Megazord style boss. Or you have this stage, where you have an optional boss fight against a kaiju. Speaking of which, the game also has branching storylines depending on what you do and who you defeat or don't defeat. And you also gain experience and level up as you defeat enemies, making you more powerful. Yeah, this game feels like the culmination of what the first game was aiming for, and it's a damn shame that not only did we not get it in the West, but it also hasn't been translated yet. S tier. The Note is a first-person horror game that is honestly unlike anything I've ever seen. You're a team of investigators who are exploring a mansion in Italy, where some kids have gone missing. And I gotta say, I've played and even reviewed this game before, and it's always given me a real Deadly Premonition vibe to it, due to how janky it is and its S-tier voice acting.
Do you think the kids were really here? I can't get those photos of the spirits out of my head.
And the dialogue is just weird and nonsensical. Like, you're exploring this mansion and then you come across this creepy lady who's there for no reason. And she implies that she knows where the kids are. But she won't tell you anything until you do a favor for her and come back tomorrow. And you just accept that without any further questions. Wow, great investigation there, guys. Anyway, this is a first-person horror game in the truest sense of the word, meaning that you even blink as you play the game. And the more damaged you are, the harder it is to see. The controls are also kinda weird and janky. Like, instead of having a generic action button, you need to set up your own shortcuts, like a button for opening or closing doors, a button for examining stuff, for using the shotgun, for reloading the shotgun, for lighting matches, that sort of thing. Literally, you need a button for every item on your inventory, which is just hilarious. Not only is your health bar managed by your blinking, but you also have no idea if you're about to run out of ammo until you need to reload, and you won't know if you're out of ammo cartridges until the reload stops working. The game also has an interesting gameplay mechanic with fireplaces, as you need to open or close curtains and turn on fireplaces to be able to see what you're doing. Oh, and did I mention that there's also a day to night cycle? Because that also comes into play, as sometimes characters will ask you to be at a certain place at a certain time. You can also go into the city and buy items and ammo, or rest at a hotel to speed up time and replenish health. And you get more money by selling items you find while defeating enemies. The gunplay is pretty simple, and this really isn't meant to be an action game, but I do enjoy the tension that comes with you not really knowing how much ammo you have or if you even need to reload. This game is weird, janky, and unique, and I honestly really dig it. It's not for everyone, but this is a B+ for me. This is Gunmen Wars by Namco for arcades, a team deathmatch game where you play as robots going around various maps and taking your opponents out. And I'd love to give you a proper review of this game, but as far as I know, there's currently no way of emulating this game, and even this footage I had to source it from YouTube. Maybe one day MAME will be able to handle it, but for now I have no way of reviewing this. Next up, we have Outrigger for arcades, though I'll be playing the Sega Dreamcast version. And this is a deathmatch game where you basically go around taking other players out and collecting points, with whoever gets the most points at the end winning the match. And the game can be played in third person or first person, though I'll be playing it in first person. One thing that's interesting about this game is that you gain points by taking out enemies, but also by collecting the coin that they drop when you defeat them. And if you're not careful, one of your opponents might steal it from you before you have the chance to collect it, which adds an interesting element of kill steal. And credit where credit is due. This game came out the same year as Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament, meaning that Japanese developers were really paying attention to where the Western gaming scene was going. And it's a shame that this game was made with Sega Net in mind, but it released a few months after Sega discontinued the Dreamcast. Regardless, Sega fans love to hype up this game, but I'll be honest, I'm not really feeling it. The maps are super small and feel like a far cry when compared to its Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament counterparts, and the AI isn't great either. Not only that, but if you're not playing online or split screen with friends, then this game really has nothing for you. The bots are fine enough, I guess, but other than that, all you have is a series of missions where you take out a bunch of bots, collect coins, or reach the various waypoints in under 1 minute. It just feels like the developers were scrambling to find something for you to do if you didn't have SegaNet. Look, I'm sorry, I know Sega fans love this one, but for me, this ain't it. See there. Now get ready for one of the most unique games in this video, because this is Germs for the original PlayStation. And man, weird doesn't even begin to cover this one. Okay, so this is a first-person open-world cosmic horror game. So you begin in your office where you can read your email or the news, and you start noticing that things are a little weird, but you don't know exactly what. So you get an email from your friend saying that something's wrong, and he asks to meet up with you. So, in order to meet up with him, you'll have to reach his workplace, and you have a fully explorable city to walk around at your leisure. But you walk really slowly, so you're better off just getting in your car. But driving your car is awkward to say the least, and it's not exactly fast either. The car can also easily get stuck in most places, and not only that, but you sometimes have to walk to places or travel using the bus. But if that happens, then fret not, because you can use a payphone to call up your assistant and he'll bring your car to you. And when you get in a building, you can talk to people, and the sense of unease and uncanny valley really lends itself to the game's mood, as some characters have no face, while others have these creepy expressions. Oh, and have I mentioned the sound design? Like, check out the hotel theme! Or how about the sound it plays whenever you go out into the city? And even your computer has the most unsettling boot up sound effect I've ever heard. And the feeling of eeriness and loneliness doesn't end there, because you might notice that you never see anyone in the city. Sure, you'll find NPCs in the various buildings, but other than that, it's just you by your lonesome self in this grey-looking city. I'm assuming this was done out of technical limitations, but it all kind of works in the game's favor. Anyway, as you reach your friend, he tells you there's something wrong in the power plant, so you go there. And people are just kind of stonewalling you in a weird way. So you go around the back and everyone starts attacking you. And this is when the game's action scenes begin. Now you're defending yourself using guns, because it turns out that you're in an Invader of the Body Snatchers type deal, where an alien virus is infecting people and they'll pretend to be normal humans in front of you until you suss them out. And the game's unsettling eerie behavior doesn't end there, because after you take someone out, you can investigate the bodies and the game will give information on who they are. Like, they'll tell you they had a happy family, or that they were a good father, or that they were the best at their job, that sort of thing. Oh, and the shooting doesn't work the way you think it does. Basically, rather than pointing at foes, you need to auto-lock onto each one, and when you fire, the gun can either hit or miss depending on your stats. So, yes, the combat basically works like Morrowind, where it's not enough to aim properly, but there's also a dice roll behind the scenes. Though thankfully, the more you use a weapon type, the better you get at it. If you're ever hurt, you can just go to the hospital and heal up. But the interesting thing here is that you can technically attack every NPC in the game. And because everyone talks and behaves so strangely, you never know who's an alien and who isn't. That is, until I figured out that you can just save and then attack them, and when they go down, they'll briefly turn into their true form. Like, you can do this at a hospital and no one will say anything, though it is an easy way of leveling up your weapon skills. And not just that, but as the story progresses, the emails, newsletters, and news articles you read get progressively more deranged, telling you that they're going to eat you from the inside out and the like. I swear, this game is like someone combined all the elements of cosmic horror, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Thing, and In the Mouth of Madness in all the best and unsettling ways. ways. Unfortunately though, this game is so slow-paced and cryptic that it's honestly hard to recommend it. For this reason, I don't think I can give it a rating. Sometimes, a game is just so different, so out there, and so caught up in doing its own thing that it'd be a disservice to you and the game itself to give it a rating. So all I can say is, if this game looks interesting to you, check it out. This is Robbit Mon Dieu, the final game in the Jumping Flash series, and honestly, I think that this might be the weakest one. Okay, so the game is now set up as you going around the town doing random missions and helping people, which in turn gets you on the newspaper. So far, so good. And to be fair, the game's graphics were definitely upgraded over the first one, with better textures and more detailed character models. But I don't know, while they look better on a technical level, I miss the saturated colors of the original. Instead, everything looks quite a bit darker than the first one, which just doesn't fit the mood if you ask me. Another weird thing is how a lot of these missions are over in an instant. Like, you now have missions where you have to jump from point A to point B, or you need to jump down and go through a bunch of hoops. In the previous games, this would have been part of a much bigger level, and you'd have to complete this to progress. But here, this is the level, and it's over nearly instantly. You also have a lot of cutscenes before and after each stage, and even though I don't understand what they're saying, I've watched enough anime to get the gist out of it, and most of it doesn't seem to be that funny or interesting to justify this many cutscenes. Honestly, this isn't a bad game, but Robbit Mon Dieu feels more like a sidestep rather than an evolution, and I'd even go as far as to say that it's a noticeable step down from the previous entries. Beat there. I guess we're finally entering the Resident Evil series, starting with Resident Evil Survivor for the original PlayStation. This is a light gun game that also lets you move freely in all directions. You can control the game with either a light gun or the PS1 controller, though if you live in the US, the light gun feature was removed, making it a full-fledged FPS experience. Though if that's the case for you, you're not really missing out on much, because I feel the game plays better with the controller anyway. So this is a Resident Evil spin-off where you play as an amnesiac who wakes up in a town overrun with zombies. And now it's your job to survive not just the zombies, but also apparently the humans who are accusing you of some pretty heinous crimes, though you can't remember what you did. What I find interesting is that unlike normal light gun games, this game also has some light exploration, so you'll have to search rooms for keys, switches, and healing items, all of which get added to your inventory. Like, I am actually impressed at how true to the traditional Resident Evil formula this is. If anything, my major complaint is that they didn't take this far enough, as you'll usually find all the items you need 1 or 2 rooms over, and once you progress enough, you're usually locked out of the previous rooms. This is just really interesting because it feels like a prototype to the modern Resident Evil formula that we have today, except that it was done for the original PlayStation, while being more simplified than it honestly should have been. I've heard some poor things about this game, so I was honestly surprised by how much I've enjoyed it. And it's pretty surprising to see how everything is in full 3D, unlike the previous Resident Evil games, which used pre-rendered backgrounds. I also really like the combat. Your handgun has infinite ammo, but you'll soon find additional weapons like the shotgun, which do have limited ammo, and you'll have to hunt more ammo down during the exploration phase. And hitting different parts of a zombie will yield different damage outputs. You'll also occasionally have to deal with an undefeatable enemy called the Tyrant, which is basically this game's nemesis. But it doesn't stop at just regular zombies, as you'll also have to deal with some series staples, like those jumping guys whose names I can never remember, and you'll even find journals to read. So overall, yeah, I was really surprised at how true this is to the original series. I just wish it were longer and that they would have gone further with the exploration formula, because if they did, this would have been a modern Resident Evil on the original PlayStation. As it is though, it's a B tier. Resident Evil Survivor was quickly followed up the next year with Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica for the PlayStation 2. Yes, we're finally entering the PS2 era, and you'd think the more powerful hardware would mean a better game, right? But sadly, no. In fact, this game barely has anything to do with Resident Evil. This is just an FPS arcade game that could have been about anything, really. All of these survival horror and exploration elements of the previous game are gone, and instead it's all about following the map to find the key and then going for the exit. You can't even aim up or down like in the previous game, so it doesn't matter what body part you aim for so long as you actually hit your target. You also have a time limit that is doable but fairly stingy if you wander around too long, and once it reaches 0, Nemesis will chase after you, which does at least add to the tension. Although the real boss fight is what happens when you're a minute away from the timer reaching 0, because you then get to listen to this.
Biohazard contamination detected. Level S. Instruction A executed. All personnel evacuate immediately. Biohazard contamination detected. Level S. Instruction A executed. All personnel evacuate immediately.
I hope you like hearing that, because the game is gonna keep playing it on repeat for a full minute and it gets really old really fast. And I don't know, so much of this game feels unfinished. Like, you get some dialogue between missions, but the characters aren't voice acted, nor do they say anything noteworthy. Now contrast that to the previous game, which not only had plenty of spoken dialogue, but the dialogue itself at least felt like it was going somewhere. And man, I don't know, even the gunplay does not feel that interesting. I was just really disappointed with this one. D tier. But we're not done yet, because Capcom would follow that up the next year with Dino Stalker, which is basically Resident Evil Survivor, but now with Dino Crisis. And this game starts out with a really silly premise, in that you're a World War II fighter pilot who suddenly got transported back in time to the dinosaur period, except you're now using sci-fi guns like lasers and rocket launchers. The levels are much more open than Code Veronica, which definitely makes it feel closer to a traditional FPS. And in fact, some of these levels require not only exploration but even some basic platforming. If anything, the one thing I don't get is why do we still have a time limit? I mean, at this point we're way deeper into FPS territory than we are into light gun territory. The plot is pretty nonsensical, which I'm generally okay with, although I do feel sorry for those poor Dino Crisis fans. They got one great game, a pretty good sequel, and it it's been all downhill ever since. Taken by itself though, it's fine I guess. I like the weapon variety and I enjoyed the boss fights. But that time limit could have been friendlier though. It's not great, but you could do worse. See there. This is Counter-Strike Neo, which is basically Counter-Strike launched for arcades in Japan, and as far as I can tell, the game was co-developed by Valve and Namco, though I assume there's a lot more of Valve than Namco here. And it basically seems like regular Counter-Strike, but with new factions and a new anime aesthetic. I say it seems because it turns out that Technoparrot, the emulator used for running modern arcade games, is now charging a subscription fee for a few online games, and Counter-Strike Neo is one of them, so I didn't get to play it. And the fact that the game would just keep giving me an error every time I tried to run it. Yeah, as we approach the mid-2000s and mid-2010s arcade and PC gaming scenes, I'll be running into a few issues like these, but I'll be sure to point them out. Still, I'm afraid I can't really review this one, but near as I can tell, it's basically Counter-Strike with new maps and a new coat of paints, so take that for what you will. This is X Operations, an indie game released for PCs in 2003 or 2007, I'm not really sure. I keep getting conflicting information on this. And this game is notable not just for being an FPS created in Japan, but also because the full game is just 3 megabytes. Yes, really. I've played Sega Mega Drive games that are larger than that. The graphics look par for the course for an indie game made in 2003, but a little behind the times if this was indeed released in 2007. And the game has no plot to speak of. It's just a series of random maps that you choose and play them to completion. And there are a lot of maps here. Most of them is just you taking out every enemy on the level, though each map will only last you 2 to 3 minutes at the most. But you also have some team deathmatch games, which are usually over in just 30 seconds. But then again, you also have maps where the developers are clearly just having fun, like the one where you're part of a SWAT team and you need to stop Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator, or the level where you need to protect Saddam Hussein from the invading American forces. I did not see that one coming. The gameplay seems to be heavily inspired by the realistic style of shooter that was so in vogue in 2003, namely Counter-Strike and Rainbow Six. And to its credit, this game understands the concept of a headshot, which is more than can be said for a lot of Japan-made FPS games that would come out after X Operations. I don't want to be too harsh on this game because it's a freeware title made by a small team of bedroom coders and it's just 3 megabytes. Not to mention that the game itself seems to have garnered something of a cult following during its heyday, with fans making new maps for it, and there's even a fan remake project in the works. I get the appeal, but it's clearly a product of its time and circumstance. See it there. Now here's an interesting one. Shadow Tower Abyss is a first-person RPG made by From Software. Yes, that From Software. And if there's one way I could describe this game, it would be Kingsfield with guns. Now, as you might imagine, this game was only ever launched in Japan, but we did get a translation patch recently, which is how I'm playing this. The story is odd and cryptic, but basically you're stuck in a deep dark cave that is populated by otherworldly creatures, and you really get a sense of dread and loneliness as you explore the game. I also like how you'll meet other human remains whose clothing and equipment will range from modern guns and ammo all the way to knights and swords, which kind of implies that this has been going on for centuries. And the game really thrives on its atmosphere, as you don't even get a soundtrack, it's all ambient sounds. Combat can either be done through melee or firearms, and firearms really give you a distinct advantage over over most enemies, but ammo is hard to come by, so it's usually a good idea to conserve as much of it as you can. A lot of the combat feels closer to something like the Elder Scrolls or King's Field, particularly if you don't want to waste ammo. And if you have enough stamina and get your timing right, you can even deliver a few simple combos. The kills in this game are really brutal though. You'll see arms and heads flying off, but despite that, a lot of enemies will still keep attacking you regardless. I really like the plot in this game as well, which is conveyed to you through the usual From Software cryptic methods. You feel as though you're an invader in their world, and though not everyone is out to get you, it's clear that everyone is afraid of you, or afraid of the consequences of being near you. With the popularity of Dark Souls and people now discovering King's Field, I think we'd all be doing a disservice to ourselves if we missed out on this game as well. A+. This is Simple 2000 Volume 6, the survival game. And for those unaware, Simple 2000 was a run of low-budget releases for the PlayStation 2 in Japan. And this one is all about airsoft guns. So the idea is that you create your squad of airsoft buddies and personalize each one and then set off on battles. These will usually involve locations that seem inspired off of real-world locations in Japan, where I assume the developers have had their own airsoft matches. Matches are done in teams ranging from 2 to 5 characters, and there's no health bar here. If someone's hit even by a single airsoft ball, they're out. Now, if you are hit, you can just switch to the other character or characters in your team. And because you can only take one hit before you're out, the game places a heavy emphasis on stealth and slow, methodical movement. Though truth be told, the enemy AI is kinda not great. And in fact, the game's pacing is a little too slow, and the gameplay is, dare I say, a little too basic for its own good. Between missions, you'll also make money which you can then spend on better gear and weapons, and if you decide to go for a quick random game, you can use every gear in the game, which definitely shows how better armor comes with increased movement speed. Another interesting thing is that because these are airsoft guns, they don't act the way regular weapons do. What I mean is, these can be affected by wind, distance and angles in ways that bullets aren't. So for example, if an enemy is just out of your firing reach, you can try to aim up and hope that they get hit by a stray pellet. It's a cheap hit, but the game counts them anyway. Or you can use a downed player as a shield, because they don't actually disappear, they just raise their arms to signal that they're out of the match. It's clear that this game was made by airsoft fans, and while I get what they were going for, I don't think it works. D-. This is Breakdown for the original Xbox by Namco, and this is an interesting one. The game was made in Japan, but it's pretty clear that it was trying to appeal to a Western audience, more specifically the Xbox audience, who at the time was usually seen as only caring about shooters and dude bro games. So what you have is a game whose FMV intro looks like a movie trailer, complete with a scene that was lifted straight from The Matrix and a tutorial segment taken from Halo. The game is a mix of a first-person shooter and a beat-em-up, and it really feels that if this weren't made for the Xbox, the developers would have simply made a third-person action game, because the beat-em-up section feels super awkward, and the shooting is pretty bare bones. I mean, you barely get any new guns. Your first weapon outside of the tutorial area is a machine gun, and then it takes like an hour or two to even find your first handgun. The game is also really funny in how everything is handled in first person, including health recovery items, so you're just gonna be downing burgers and soda cans in record time in the middle of a firefight. The plot is that you're some sort of a science experiment by the government, which gives you special abilities. But there's also a separate faction of people who have powers like yours, and they're attacking the building you're in. So from here on out, the game takes place inside the building Die Hard style.
Sneak around, crawl in some vents, do a die hard.
With you taking out the soldiers who are basically cannon fodder and these dudes who are immune to weapons and instead need to be beaten into submission. As the game progresses, you'll also get upgrades like a bigger health bar and abilities like a shield that blocks bullets. I really respect how weird and unique this game is, even if each individual part feels a little undercooked, though the game is clearly greater than the sum of its parts. Unfortunately though, the entire experience is pretty uneven, with some massive difficulty spikes that come out of nowhere. Like, no joke, it took me a full hour just to beat these two regular dudes who just attack you out of nowhere, and part of the reason for that is just how stiff your hand-to-hand combat is. Like, yeah, you can pull off combos, but each directional input changes the attack you perform, so sometimes you're trying to block or move sideways, but instead you end up performing a completely different action than the one you intended. And once you commit to an attack, you just have to wait for the animation to end, which can take a really long time and leaves you vulnerable to being hit yourself. Breakdown is weird, janky, and needed a lot more time in the playtest phase. But it's also kind of unique and interesting in just how different it is. It's not for everyone, but I dig it. B+. This is Coded Arms by Konami for the PlayStation Portable, and this is a sort of return to that mid-90s era of mech and power armor games in long corridors, though now the formula was updated with modern sensibilities. For starters, you now move like you do in any other FPS game, and the story is that you're a hacker and every level is a different level of encryption in some server or other, I don't know. This basically gives the developers the freedom to let you explore factories, cities, and ancient temples without having to build a narrative around it. Though it does seem like they ran out of ideas pretty fast, because you basically just have a level type and then you revisit that level in increasingly difficult maps for each scenario. One cool thing about the game is the weapon and armor variety. Basically, like its 90s predecessors, this game has a strong dungeon crawling component to it. So as you defeat enemies, you'll collect new weapons, but also gear and items that get added to your inventory, allowing you to pick and choose your loadout between missions. You'll also pick up chips that upgrade your weapons and items, though you'll have to collect multiple of these to level up, and each chip is specific to each weapon type. I generally like this game, but this is when we start entering that mid-2000 Japanese FPS era where enemies just don't really react to your shots. What I mean is, you can fire at them and they'll try to take you down, but they don't try to take cover or ambush you or really behave any different just because you're damaging them. Thankfully though, the game controls pretty well on an emulator with the aiming buttons mapped to the second analog stick. Coded Arms would also get a sequel on the PSP, but that one was made by a Russian studio and only published by Konami, so it doesn't count for this video. Overall though, the gameplay and enemy behavior is a little weak, but the dungeon crawling elements heighten the experience. B+. Next up, we have Ghost in the Shell standalone complex for the PlayStation Portable. Yes, in 2005 we got two first-person shooters made in Japan for the PlayStation Portable centered around hacking. And yes, it was weird back then too. Okay, so I'll just come out and say that I never understood the plot of standalone complex and its games, and it's no different here. So I just went from mission to mission, completing objectives, and I'm leaving the lore to Ghost in the Shell fans. The game gives you a series of missions with varying objectives, and in the game's defense, these can be pretty creative. Sure, you'll have the usual, like taking out all enemies or get from point A to point B, but you also have missions where you need to disarm bombs or stop a rogue android while avoiding civilian casualties. But the thing is, For every mission I liked, there was another one that just felt like a slog. The one where you had to disarm bombs should have been fun in theory, but in practice, I had already cleared the entire map of foes and just kept looking for every nook and cranny for the last bomb that I just could not find. I also like how you can switch between the various main characters from the anime for each mission, and they all have slightly different stats. Although, it is kind of funny how the Major's outfit looks so out of place when compared to everyone else. Man, the mid-2000s really were something else. During each mission, you're accompanied by a Tachikoma tank, and you can even pick the weapon loadout for it yourself. The Tachikoma will usually follow you, but you can also give it a few basic orders, though you can't complete the mission or progress to the next area unless the Tachikoma is with you. And let me tell you, that thing cannot keep up with you. Sadly though, I'm not a big fan of the gunplay, and enemies don't really react to being hit. If anything, it feels even worse here than it did in Coded Arms. So you can technically literally stand in front of an enemy and fire at them, and it doesn't matter where you hit because as far as I can tell, this game doesn't have headshots. Thankfully, you can also enter the Tachikomas, and I feel that the gameplay becomes a lot better when you do this. I feel the game has some neat ideas, but a lot of missed potential. B tier. This is Elevator Action Reel 1 and 2 for mobile phones. Released only in Japan, these games are an FPS take on the classic elevator action games. Sadly though, as of the making of this video, these games are as of yet undumped, and as a result, I can't really review them. Hopefully, I can return to them one day. And now we jump to Half-Life 2 Survivor. Okay, so I actually did play this game a couple of times in the past, but for some reason I couldn't get it to run properly on my current computer. Regardless, I remember enough of it to speak about it, and the truth is that it's Half-Life 2. I mean, yeah, it now has these annoying tutorials with basic instructions telling you that if you press left, your character will also move left. But yeah, this really does highlight how first-person experiences weren't that common in Japan even as late as 2006. And it's especially bad during the first stage, where it feels like half the level is just one long tutorial. The game also turns most dialogue sections and even some gameplay sections into scripted cutscenes, where you actually get to see Gordon Freeman. Not only that, but they even removed parts of stages, the physics puzzles, and even some entire levels. I don't really know what to say here. This is basically Half-Life 2, but changed, cut up, and worse. B tier, I guess. This is Mobile Suit Gundam Bonds of the Battlefield, and sadly, I couldn't get this game to run on Tectoparrot at all. Yeah, I don't know what's happening here, but this is a team-based mech FPS, where you need to take out other players or the enemy base. Sadly, I can't go too into it because I couldn't get it to run. But don't worry Gundam fans, we'll be returning to this game later in this video. This is Silent Hill The Escape for the Apple iPhone. Kinda. So I couldn't get this game to run, but I was able to find a fan remake of the game, which from what I can gather, it seems to do a really good job at replicating it for PC. And once again, we're back to a dungeon crawler with grid-based movement, though there's no leveling up here. Heck, there isn't even any health bar. If you're hit even once, it's game over. So the goal of the game is to find the key, which is scattered somewhere around the level, and then look for the exit. And the level is populated by nurses and other Silent Hill type monsters. Your only means of defense is your gun, which has limited ammo, but you can find more as you explore each stage. The game is okay, it's kinda basic, but this is a 2007 iPhone game, so we can't be too demanding. I do think that the sound design and mood is generally pretty good on the PC, though I'd assume it'd be a lot less interesting if you were playing this while waiting at the doctor's office. And that's kind of this game's problem. Any sense of fear and tension gets lost if you're playing this outside on your phone, but the game would be simple enough to hold your attention. But on the PC, it has the opposite problem. The fear and tension works well, but the gameplay is just kinda basic. It's cool that it exists, and the remake itself is well made, but the core game is a bit too simple for my taste. But still, you can find it for free over at itch.io. C-. Next up, we have Simple 2000 Series, Volume 119, The Survival Game 2. Yes, the Airsoft game got a sequel, and it's pretty much the same thing as the first one. The same menus, the same controls, the same character models, and most of the same sounds. You do get some slightly better presentation with a slightly animated loading screen. And now you have indoor urban levels. But other than that, this is exactly the same game as the first one. I'll increase the rating to a D tier. Next up, we have Gun-Katana, a game that is part visual novel and part FPS. Yes, really! The game is set to play closer to the classic style of FPSs like Doom or Quake, and you can even learn new skills and go on side quests. There's just one problem. This game hasn't been translated yet, so yeah, I can't review this. But I can recommend an excellent review of the game by Amalie Dori, where she goes super in-depth into the game. I'll be sure to leave a link in the pinned comment. Tell her I sent you.
Time Crisis 4.
We now jump to Time Crisis 4, specifically the PS3 version, which has an exclusive FPS mode, not to be confused with Time Crisis 4 on the Raising Storm compilation, where they actually removed this feature. And you know the funny thing? I actually own and played this game, but it turns out that the Elgato capture cards are not compatible with PS3s, so here I am talking about it while using someone else's footage. And yeah, this game ain't great. On one hand, I'm surprised they took an on-rail shooter and gave you full control. I mean, you can even jump. But the problem is that this is still a light gun game at its heart. What I mean is that the gunplay and enemies don't behave like an FPS. They behave like it's a light gun game. So they just stand there firing at you without taking any cover or trying to ambush you. And most of them go down with a single hit no matter where you hit them. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but without an actual light gun in your hand, it doesn't even feel like you're firing a gun. It just feels like you're pressing a button and the enemy goes down. Also, you have some Halo style health regeneration. It's even using Halo sound effect. Yeah, this ain't great. It's a cool little bonus, but you're not missing out on much. D tier. Hey, remember Mobile Suit Gundam Bonds the Battlefield? It's back in PSP form. Yes, the Gundam arcade game that I couldn't play got a PSP port, and it's Okay, so the game is basically a 4v4 game where you go on a series of maps and you win by being the side with the most takedowns or by destroying the enemy base, the latter of which takes a lot of hits to go down. You can do some pretty long jumps, and even though I've never watched Gundam, I'm starting to get acquainted with the weapons and mech designs just by virtue of making this video. What's interesting is that where the Saturn game was fast and frantic, in this one you move rather slow. Even your jumping feels kinda slow, and your weapons have a pretty long refire rate. It's also kind of annoying how every time you hit a foe, you hear a character say, hit two, over and over again. Honestly, my favorite thing about this game is the soundtrack, which I assume was taken from the series. And man, I gotta say, they don't make music like this anymore. It's pretty clear that this is a game for the fans, and if you're not a fan, well, there's not a lot here for you. So I'm gonna give it a C tier. But if you're a Gundam fan, feel free to upgrade it to a B tier. Alright, it's time for more Wii games, this time with Water Warfare by Hudson Soft, a WiiWare arena-style FPS game created with a zapper in mind. And the game is pretty simple. You have a bunch of arenas to choose from, where you and up to 7 players can go around and engage in death matches, team death matches, capture the flag, that sort of thing. All your weapons are squirt guns, and you'll have the regular squirt guns, but also double squirt guns, squirt sniper rifles, machine guns, water launchers, you know, the usual. And you can also get items to help you out, like banana peels to trip up enemies, raincoats which basically act as armor, buckets of water that you can throw at foes, that sort of thing. Reloading a weapon also takes quite a bit of time, so much so that you're usually better off just finding another one instead. And it's pretty clear that this game was built with the Wii's online functionalities in mind, but that's no longer possible. So now your options are to play against bots or do missions, the latter of which were giving me some real Outrigger vibes. I did a few missions, but they didn't hold my attention for long, so I just went and did various matches against bots, and it became pretty clear that maps basically came in two sizes, small and even smaller. Like, there's basically 2 decently sized maps in this game, and the rest feel like they were built to be played by 4 players rather than 8. Not only that, but the bots here are really bad. Like, you can walk up to them and just start wailing at them and they'll ignore you. Other times they'll get their pathways stuck against walls. I'm playing this on the hardest difficulty setting and I was already dominating the game on my first hour. Not to mention that there's barely any maps at all. If you want a proper water gun arena shooter, then check out Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash for the PS4. That one's a blast. This one though, not really. D tier. But Hudson Soft wasn't quite done with WiiWare FPS games, which is why we also got Onslaught on the same year. And this game is basically Hudson Soft's take on Starship Troopers.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
And it's a surprisingly good one. Most bugs are satisfyingly squishy and it just feels so good mowing them down and see all the bits and pieces jump out everywhere. Each mission you carry 4 weapons with you, which consist of an assault rifle, submachine gun, rocket launcher, and a shotgun. Plus you also get grenades and a laser whip. And as the game progresses, you can even upgrade your arsenal. Most enemies are suitably dumb and squishy.
Frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
But what they lack in immediate threat, they make up for it in numbers. And at first, the game takes a while to get going, but once it does, you're just fighting hordes and hordes of enemies, and I don't know about you, but I just really got that Starship Troopers video game experience I've been craving ever since I first saw the movie. I mean, one of the enemies even looks like it was taken straight from the movie and then miniaturized. Specifically, these blue plasma shooting dudes, which remind me a lot of the big plasma shooting dudes from the movie. Missions are also varied enough, which are usually about getting from point A to point B, defending a base, taking out several targets, protecting supplies, that sort of thing. And you also have some really fun boss fights, and even a few vehicle sections. Honestly, this game is a blast. And as you defeat enemies in close proximity, your screen will often be smeared by their butt guts, and you gotta clear it by shaking the Wiimote, which, yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Also, the game just loves telling you that you're still a kid. But I do like how it rewards combos and promotes high scores. I like this arcade take on the genre. The settings are a bit repetitive and it needs more enemy variety, but I can see why this game had a bit of a cult following back in the day. It's a surprisingly fun FPS for the Wii, especially considering that this is a WiiWare title. A-. We cap off 2009 with Cyberdiver, another arcade game FPS, and this was intended as an upgrade kit for Half-Life 2 Survivor arcade boards. Sadly, this is yet another game that I could not get to work properly, and man does that bother me, because this arena-style shooter looks really fun. We need to find an easier way to emulate these games. Sadly though, I can't give it a proper score on this one. This is Metal Gear Arcade for, well, arcades. And this is yet another game that stayed in Japan. Though we're really not missing much here. Okay, so I should point out that this game literally crashes all the time. So much so that I couldn't even see any of the stages past this one because the game just kept crashing on me. But yeah, the game basically lets you play single player missions or team deathmatches, and I mean, the gunplay is fine enough, I guess, but once again, enemies don't react to being hit. Though at least they go down super fast, so it's no big deal here. My real issue is how dumb they all are. They walk up right in front of you and have absolutely terrible aim. And they'll even occasionally get stuck in their pathways. I mean, look at this! Every match I played basically devolved to both sides roughly taking the same cover spots and then firing at each other over and over again, with anyone hardly ever hitting anyone else. And the maps, or at least the one map I was able to play, is incredibly small. It feels like it was made for a 1v1 rather than 5v5 matches. Man, Metal Gear deserves better than this. D tier. That's right, we're back to the Airsoft series. And you might be thinking, wait, this series got a third entry? No, it got a fourth entry. The third entry was a third-person shooter, which is why I didn't talk about it. But yes, we're back to covering this series, now on the PSP, and wow, their budget went up. I especially love how both PSP games now use rock and hip-hop songs intermixed with real-life and game footage of what I assume are the developers who are honestly having the best day of their lives. Not only that, but the game's presentation as a whole is a lot better. You have the same weapon and gear shops, but everything is just better, more professional, and that extends to the game as well. The graphics are pretty decent for the PSP game, and your movement is now much faster. The airsoft physics are still there, and you now even have some challenge missions if you don't want to do just matches. And like in the previous game, as you clear an enemy team, you gain money to upgrade your equipment. And it's kinda funny too how you'll now sometimes be matched against teams of cosplayers. Not only that, but the game also added a fatigue mechanic, meaning that if you're moving a lot, your character gets winded and your vision even becomes blurry. Unfortunately, the enemy and friendly AI is still not perfect. This is basically the same game as the PS2 entries, but just better executed in every way. And I am honestly impressed. Be there. Alright, it's time for the Legend of Alfur. And this game, oh boy, where do I even begin? So the game takes place in a fantasy interpretation of 19th century Europe, and you play as a brother and sister duo who were captured and framed for the death of a noble, thereby creating a war. But you two escape, and from there on you pick up an AK-47 and just start going wild. Like, I wouldn't even mind if it looked like some sort of a fantasy gun, but no, this is just an AK-47. And that's not even a half of it. And you're just out there fighting armies dressed like 19th century nobles. Then of course there's the fact that every time you take out an enemy, they just jump in the air. Oh, but don't worry, because you'll also be making the most spectacular jumps when you die. But for each level you can choose to play as a brother or sister, but near as I can tell, it doesn't actually change anything other than a few voice lines. Additionally, you're just always fighting the same AK-47 wielding enemies. You don't even meet any snipers, vehicles or rocket launchers. It's just the same generic looking dudes over and over again. And the game basically swarms you with them. But you have regenerating health, so it's usually fairly easy to survive the onslaught. Although it is funny how the final boss is just a knight in full plate armor who's also wielding an AK-47. And you might be asking yourself, is he difficult to take down? No, not really. Another funny thing is the music. You might think they'd use something epic or instrumental to reflect the 19th century vibe, but no, it's usually just techno or dubstep. This game is hilarious. This is a definition of so bad it's good. F tier. But an F tier that wraps itself around into becoming an A tier. This is Left 4 Dead Survivors, a Japanese arcade version of Left 4 Dead. I should point out though that we're about to enter a portion of our video where I'm starting to have problems with running the games while recording gameplay. Let's just say that when trying to do both at the same time, my computer wasn't having a good time. Anyway, this is basically just Left 4 Dead. As far as I can tell, nothing's changed, other than the fact that you have a new main cast and you were given a new UI. This is another one of those games that I almost didn't include because I think it's fair to say that the Japanese side of the development on this game was fairly minor. So yeah, it's just Left 4 Dead with new characters and a more confusing UI. We now return to Resident Evil with Resident Evil 7, which was a game that basically revitalized the whole franchise. And with good reason too, because this game is excellent. This feels like a return to the classic games, but in first-person mode. In fact, this feels like what Resident Evil Survivor should have been. And I gotta be honest here, it's kind of hard for me to review this game, because there's nothing left to say. Everyone and their mom already knows about Resident Evil 7. At least with Half-Life and Left 4 Dead, I could talk about their small differences, but here, no, I've got nothing to say, besides the fact that everything you've heard about the game is true. This is an excellent first-person survival horror game that you should absolutely check out. S tier. This is Yodoyabashi Oyasama Club, and we're about to enter the portion of the video where it feels like the Japanese finally discovered its software. In this case, you play as an Ojo-sama who's out to destroy everything in her path. And my god, this game is so satisfying. It is just so brutal, and I love how your character even does the princess laugh. You have knife-wielding Ojo-samas, girls with guns, rocket launchers, and even a giant Ojo-sama. And it's kind of interesting too, because during this portion the game basically becomes a mix of an FPS with a bullet hell shooter. Unfortunately though, this game is super short, as in it takes like 5 minutes to beat and your only weapon is the Uzi. Man, that is such a shame. If this were a proper full game with multiple weapons, this would have been an A tier at the minimum. As it is though, best I can do is C tier. Well, time for Seed of the Dead, I guess. This is a spicy game on Steam, so get ready for some carefully picked editing. So basically the zombie apocalypse is upon us, and you're just some random dude trying to survive with 3 other women, one of which has like the most annoying voice I've ever heard. She must have gone to the Stika School of Voice Acting because, my god. Oh man, it's like nails on a chalkboard. Anyway, this game is super basic. It's all about surviving waves of enemies or trying to get from point A to point B. And while there are some interesting enemies like these huge tapeworms, for the most part, you're just fighting a never-ending torrent of these same-looking zombies over and over again. Also, you'll sometimes see the hordes of zombies just pop into existence right in front of you or around you, which kind of breaks the immersion.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Another weird thing is how the game looks so realistic, but then your characters just so obviously stand out, to the point where they look like plastic dolls. Characters will often say random things, but I swear every time that blonde girl speaks, it's just nails and chalkboard. Anyway, as the girls get hit, they lose their clothes, and if their health drops to 0, you gotta revive them by... you know where this is going. And look, I'm not here to judge spicy games. You've all seen my videos and my thumbnails. You know I'm fine with this stuff. It's just that doing it out in the streets surrounded by zombies, all while the girls look like plastic dolls, it's not even hot. And then between stages you have these visual novel type cutscenes that just drag on for way too long. I'm sorry, but no. F tier. From one spicy game to another, this is Harem Trigger, and this game is basically Galgun if Galgun were an FPS. You even have the same basic plot. You're in a school and every girl is suddenly afflicted with boy fever, specifically for you. So you just go around and hit them with your gun, which brings them to their senses. And you can go for headshots, which seriously, this game has headshots? Out of all the games that didn't, this is the one that has them. Oh man. Anyway, you can go for headshots for extra damage, or aim at the girls as thingamabobs and they'll instantly come on the spot. And between missions, you can go to a shop to upgrade your weapons and skills. And honestly, this game has basically all of the same issues as Seed of the Dead, and even a few new ones. For one thing, the models are really unappealing, and so are the animations. Again, this ain't even hot. And like, at least Seed of the Dead had some varied enemies. This is literally just the same enemy type over and over again. F tier. This is The Citadel, another game that was clearly inspired by the likes of id Software, and it's honestly one of the best FPSs I've ever played. So the story is cryptic and only drip-fed to you, but near as I can tell, you're in the far-off future and you're some kind of agent sent to take down a cult. And I really love the graphics and art style, and the gunplay just feels immensely satisfying. Enemies are super varied, and I swear, every time I take one down, it just makes me go damn! Levels have a ton of verticality and secrets, like this fortress entry alone has so many hidden passageways that I spent an hour here just exploring them all. The game doesn't offer any quick saves either, so if you make a mistake, you gotta restart from a checkpoint, which could mean a lot of lost progress. Everything this game does is just so damn cool. Even the act of reloading has to be a conscious decision, because you need to individually load up each bullet onto your handgun yourself. And I also love how all weapons have a secondary mode, like the machine gun for example. You can use it to spray against human enemies or fire off a laser against machines, vehicles or heavily armored foes. Or you can just peek around the corner and shoot, and there's NPCs to talk to, and shops and money, and damn, those kills are just so amazing! If you've never heard of The Citadel, you have to play this game, and we need a physical release of this game ASAP. Easiest S tier I've ever given in my life. This is Fantastic Rain, a doujin FPS dungeon crawler released digitally over at the L site. But sadly, this game isn't very good. I mean, presentation-wise, it's excellent. I love the graphics, the animations, and the mid-2000s anime art style. I don't know what the plot is, but I assume you're some kind of adventurer in town, and you go to the various key points in the city to buy weapons and ammo, talk to people, or items to help you out. Unfortunately though, once you actually enter a dungeon and play the game, that's when it all goes downhill. First off, your enemies move way too fast, making it difficult to aim. Not only that, but enemies are constantly spawning, even in places where you've already been. So it's easy to be surprised by someone attacking you from behind. Other times they just kinda pop out of nowhere, leaving you utterly confused. Fighting is really awkward too, because it can be slow and difficult to aim, and the game takes a while to register that you want to put your gun down and go back to exploring, so I suffered even more cheap hits because of that. As if that weren't enough, you can run out of ammo, and when that happens, all you have left is your melee attack, which looks cool, but basically tickles your enemies if you're lucky. Oh, and believe me, you will run out of ammo. I went into the dungeon with 100 bullets and barely explored 10% before I ran out. So I go back to the shop and I only have enough money for like 4 reloads, because ammo is super expensive in this game. As you beat enemies, you gain experience and level up, but you level up really slow. Each foe you take down gives you about 10 experience points, but with me always running out of ammo, I couldn't even reach level 2. So yeah, basically, I love everything about this game except the actual gameplay. Man, so much wasted potential. D-.
Stand by. Dino!
And now we're back to Resident Evil with Resident Evil 8. And after the excellent previous entry, I thought there was no way this one could top it, and honestly, it kind of does and kind of doesn't. It feels like this took the Aliens route, where it reduced the survival horror element in favor of action, but it also really works. Between the two games, I don't know which one I like best. And again, I don't know what to say about it. It's Resident Evil 8. You don't need me to tell you to play it, because everyone else has already told you to play it. So I'm not gonna spend more time on it. Just play it. S tier. We now return to Seed of the Dead, with Seed of the Dead Sweet Home. And you're probably expecting me to be all snarky and tell you how much this game sucks, right? But actually, no! This game improves on the first one in literally every way. For starters, you have actual cutscenes now. Sure, they're perhaps a little basic, but it's a massive improvement over the barrage of static 2D art on text of the first one. And yeah, those are still here, but the character models have been improved, featuring more movement and more movement. There's also a new character archetype who later joins. Basically, it's the shy otaku trope. They even changed the blonde girl's voice actress, and she sounds way better now.
しょうがないだろ。眠くて眠くて、だるくてだるくて、面倒面倒だったんだから。いつからこの町はそんな人を無理やり働かせる場所になったんだ？
Also, during missions, characters have a lot more dialogue, but it's actually related to the mission you're on. A lot of the same enemy types from the first game make a return here. But I also really like how there's multiple models for the basic zombie, so you're not just attacking a horde of clones. And not only that, but you see more enemy types in general. They even learn how to better hide the zombies when they pop in. The weapon animations also feel better. I mean, sure, there's no real recoil, but your aiming reticle does increase the more you move. During missions, you can find collectibles, and these are then used to upgrade your base with more rooms. You even get to see and talk to various NPCs in your base, though it is kind of funny how the girls just so obviously stand out from everyone else. And I was honestly surprised that when my team members were damaged, all you had to do was use a medkit. But then I noticed that they were complaining about their clothes being torn, even though they looked just fine. And it turns out that the Steam version of the game is censored. But the devs aren't shy about telling you where to find the patch and get the real thing. In the regular version, there's zero spicy content. At most, you just get the, movement. With the patch though, yeah, it's the same as the first game. One issue I have with the censored version is that the game is now too easy. Basically, your teammates can't die in the censored version, so it does affect gameplay to some degree. I also like how occasionally the game even veers into Saints Row style comedy, regardless of which version you're playing. I feel like the developers are close to finding the right balance between spicy content, good gameplay, and the right level of humor that might just hit that sweet spot that appeals to your average gamer who just wants to shoot zombies and those looking for a gooning session. Maybe in Seed of the Dead 3. But overall, yeah, not bad actually. B tier.
違反とも言える。説明書にそう書いてあった。
This is Ghostwire Tokyo, a game whose creator has become more famous than the actual game she was presenting.
Take a look. 見てね. Thank you!
Okay, so you're in Tokyo and there's some sort of fog that turn people into ghosts. And you're hoping to save your sister who is in the hospital. And there's also a spirit dude who invaded your body and gave you extra powers and abilities. And though the game starts out relatively linear, it soon becomes pretty open world, where you even take on side quests. And this world is honestly beautiful. I do feel you're perhaps a bit too powerful against some of your foes, as combat gets a little too easy and repetitive after a while. But still, this is an excellent game. A tier. I hope you enjoyed Harem Trigger because there's a sequel, this time called Outrigger, and it's basically the same game, but it's now set in ancient Japan, and you're using realistic weapons for some reason. The character models are improved somewhat, although others still looked weird, like why the hell am I doing a half T-pose? As the girls come, they drop money which you collect to go to the store, whereas in the first game, you got money depending on how well you did. I do admit that I find this setting a bit more interesting, but overall, it's not much of an improvement. This game gets the D-. This is Hazama Queen, and it's a super interesting game. Okay, so you're an angel and you're in hell, and because you're in hell, your health is draining constantly, to the point where you cannot spend more than 30 seconds without defeating a demon or you're a goner. So that's basically it. You gotta hurry, you gotta keep running, and you gotta keep downing demons, most of which only partially restore your health. After you beat a level, you can pick one of 3 random upgrades. These can be increased damage, new weapons, melee attacks, faster refire rate, faster reloads, or longer ammo clips. And from there on, you just keep going through increasingly more difficult levels and more powerful enemies. Not gonna lie though, this game got super addicting, and the fact that you can't stop firing, and that you've always gotta be on the move works really well. Thankfully, the level design and geometry is kept pretty simple, as this is basically a simplified Wolfenstein 3D level design, meaning that there's no slopes or elevation, and no key collecting either. And because your upgrades are random, there's a real luck element to the game, meaning that this is basically an FPS roguelike. And because of that, your runs can last 30 minutes or 30 seconds, depending on what upgrades you get and when. You'll also be fighting bosses, and when you defeat one of them, you even get a bit of a story. And I really dig the simple art in these cutscenes. Yeah, this game is super addicting. A-.
Okay.
But it doesn't end there, because the developers of Hazama Queen would return the following year with Cult vs. Gel. In this game, you're an assassin sent to take out a cult, and I'm pretty sure that this game is meant to place in the Warhammer 40k universe. But you know, without the license and with things kept vague enough to avoid copyright. I mean, you work for a despotic empire, you're fighting against a cult that seduces and kidnaps people and then corrupts them and turns them into monsters. Not to mention that they give priority to victims with psi powers. So this is basically an unofficial Warhammer 40k game. Now, unlike Hazama Queen, you do not lose your health just for standing around. Instead, this plays more like a traditional FPS game, although the pacing is still kept super quick. And just like Hazama Queen, the level design is kept pretty simple. You also see a greater enemy variety, and this time, you actually do find new weapons in fixed spots. The game also has one of the coolest melee attacks I've ever seen in an FPS. With that said though, the reloading voice samples do get really old really quick.
Reloading.
The levels are always made in a way where you're always progressing forward and give you very little breathing room, which can be a good or bad thing depending on your preference for FPS level design. The story is usually told with these dialogue boxes between you and your handler, and they can run a bit long. As in, I would sometimes finish a level before their dialogue at the start of the stage was even over. And they can also be pretty distracting, especially in fighting bosses. But overall though, yeah, I really enjoyed this game, and I think I liked it better than Hazama Queen. A tier. "2025 was the year we got the sequel to Citadel, titled Beyond Citadel. This time, the game gives you a lot more story and context than the previous game. I mean, things are still kept fairly cryptic, but you now have a better idea of what's going on. Basically, you're either the same character from the first game or a series of clones, and you're considered something of a feared holy figure, because when you wake up, you kind of go on a rampage and take everything out. Which kind of implies that you might have been a villain in the previous game, and this one as well. You might also be noticing that this game has a lot more spicy content. Yeah, while the first game didn't really have any of that, this game kind of feels like it's straddling the edge of a regular game and a full-on spicy game. The gunplay is still excellent in this game, and your kills are even more spectacular than the first one. I mean, you'll rip open your foes' guts and then see them just desperately bleeding. And even just your regular gun takedowns are just spectacularly gruesome, to the point where I'm actually starting to worry about the developer's mental health. Hey man, are you okay? If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm right here, okay? Just like the previous game, you can buy gear and items, though this time you do it from sexy cyber nuns. And you can even upgrade your stats. Checkpoints are kinda cool too, as you basically find pods carrying more clones of yourself, meaning that when you lose a life, your next clone wakes up. While your enemy takedowns are spectacular, I have noticed that a lot of them are now done by overlaying multiple layers together, and if you get close enough to them, you kinda see the whole system fall apart. Hey man, are you sure you're okay? I'm not judging, I'm just checking. Heck, sometimes you even see your foes desperately trying to breathe as their life leaves them, their hands trembling as they use their last remaining strength to try and stop you. I really dig how you get different armors, and the more armor layers you get, the more your avatar changes. The game also has this weird reloading mechanic where you now need to press 3 different buttons just to take out your ammo clip, reload, and then cock your gun. I get what they were going for, and not gonna lie, this really changes the pacing and strategizing of your attacks. But when your weapon reload mechanic is arguably deeper than the combat system of most games, maybe you're flying a bit too close to the sun. Either way, this game is still spectacular, but at some points it might give you that feeling that it might have crossed the line or two. They say art should challenge you, so... S tier, I guess. And finally, we have Shooters Ready, an FPS about anime girls who are trying to compete in the sport known as practical shooting. At least I think that's what the plot is about, because I can't actually read it. And the story is also told in this visual novel style, which, to be clear, I don't have an issue with this style per se when you're playing an RPG or a visual novel, but when it's an action game, I feel they should be shorter than they often are. But then again, maybe the plot is really good, so I can't really judge. And this game is all about going into several training rooms, taking down targets, and getting as high a score as possible in the shortest amount of time. And remember when I complained about the lack of recoil in the previous games? Boy, does this game make up for it. Like, damn! But this isn't even a complaint because it just really works. It really makes you think before you shoot. Because you know that you could potentially be wasting a couple of precious seconds. I mean, this game rewards you where you hit your enemy, giving priority to headshots, but also to combos, meaning that if you miss even once, you reset your whole combo. And even the distance from where you shoot from matters. The game also has you control different girls and weapons, though these are picked for you, and it makes it kind of hard to get used to the gameplay, because each girl and each weapon have different movement speeds, recoil, and some might struggle to aim due to shaky hands. And not gonna lie, this game is super addicting, but it's also the rare example of a non-violent FPS game, and it might even work as an educational game on gun safety. The levels feel super intense as you try to rack up points, but the music and tone is relaxing and it all just kind of works. This is such a cool and unique game that not only does it deserve an English translation, it also needs a full-blown anime series. A+.